Let's stay friends with benefits, she suggested post-breakup. I upgraded to no contact, full benefits, with her sister. The family reunion awkwardness? Chef's kiss. What started as a 3-year relationship celebration turned into the most expensive lesson I ever learned about someone's true character. I'm Blake, 29, and I teach wilderness survival and outdoor education in the Colorado Rockies, a job I'm genuinely passionate about, even if it doesn't come with a tech salary or venture capital backing. For 3 years, I'd been dating Sophia, a lifestyle blogger and social media influencer who specialized in posting carefully curated content about authentic mountain living, while actually preferring Denver's upscale restaurant scene to any actual outdoor activities. I spent weeks planning what I thought would be our perfect 3-year anniversary weekend, a romantic cabin retreat in the mountains I know like the back of my hand, followed by dinner at Meridian, one of Denver's most exclusive restaurants that required a 2-month reservation and cost more per meal than most people spend on groceries in a week. I wanted everything to be perfect because I genuinely thought we were building something meaningful together. The mountain portion went well enough, though Sophia spent more time staging Instagram photos than actually enjoying the scenery, but I chalked that up to her job requirements. The real disaster came Saturday night at Meridian, where I'd arranged to meet several of her influencer friends, people I'd been trying to connect with for months because Sophia always said how important her community was to her. The moment we sat down, I could tell something was off. Sophia kept checking her phone, barely acknowledged the effort I'd put into planning the weekend, and seemed more interested in impressing her friends than celebrating our relationship. "So Blake," her friend Madison said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "Sophia tells us you're still doing the whole outdoor education thing. That's so rustic." I should have recognized the setup, but I genuinely thought they were making conversation. I love what I do. There's something powerful about teaching people to be self-sufficient in nature, helping them disconnect from technology and reconnect with fundamental survival skills. Sophia's expression shifted, and suddenly she was looking at me like I'd embarrassed her in front of royalty. "Blake, can you hear yourself right now? You sound like you're living in the past." Madison's boyfriend just launched his 3rd startup. Jessica's dating a venture capitalist. And you're talking about camping. The table went quiet, but not the kind of respectful quiet, the uncomfortable kind where people smell drama brewing and can't look away. "I'm talking about education and conservation work that actually matters," I said calmly, though I could feel heat rising in my chest. "Some people find meaning in more than just profit margins." "Meaning doesn't pay for anything, Blake," Sophia snapped, her voice carrying across half the restaurant. "I've been patient, thinking you'd eventually grow up and want something bigger, but you're still playing in the dirt for $35,000 a year while my friends' boyfriends are building actual empires." The number was wrong. I actually made decent money between my teaching contracts, private guiding, and the outdoor education programs I developed, but correcting her wasn't the point. The point was that she'd just publicly humiliated me in front of people she'd insisted I needed to impress. "Maybe we want different things," I said quietly. "Oh, we definitely want different things," she said, leaning back in her chair like she was delivering a punchline. "Which is why I think we should just be friends with benefits instead. I need someone more financially ambitious for my public image, but you're comfortable for other things." The silence at that table was deafening. Even her friends looked genuinely shocked at the cruelty of what she just said. I sat there for a moment, processing that the woman I'd spent 3 years with had just reduced our entire relationship to being her convenient hookup while she looked for someone more impressive to post about on Instagram. I pulled out my wallet, counted out $300 to cover our portion of the bill plus tip, and set it on the table. "You can collect your things from my cabin whenever it's convenient," I said, standing up. "I'll leave them on the porch." "Blake, don't be dramatic," she called after me, but I was already walking away. I could hear her friends murmuring behind me, and I caught fragments like, "totally inappropriate," and "I can't believe she just said that," but I didn't turn around. I drove back to my cabin in complete silence, my mind spinning between anger, humiliation, and something that felt almost like relief. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages from Sophia, ranging from half-hearted apologies to accusations that I was abandoning her and throwing away everything we built together. I read through them once, then blocked her number and every social media account she had. I wasn't interested in the emotional whiplash routine where she'd alternate between attacking my character and begging me to understand her perspective. Instead, I spent Sunday morning gathering all her belongings: designer clothes that cost more than my monthly utilities, skincare products that required their own refrigerated storage, and enough ring lights and camera equipment to stock a small photography studio. I was methodically packing everything into boxes when I heard a car pull up outside. Through the window, I saw a silver Subaru Outback instead of Sophia's white BMW, and out stepped someone I'd only met briefly at family gatherings: Emma, Sophia's older sister. She was wearing practical jeans and a veterinary clinic polo shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, looking like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. I opened the door before she could knock, and the first thing I noticed was how genuinely apologetic she looked, which was a stark contrast to her sister's usual dramatics. "Blake, I'm so sorry about this," she said immediately. "Sophia asked me to pick up her things because she said you two had a fight, but I heard what really happened from Madison. I wanted to apologize for my sister's behavior. What she said to you was completely unacceptable." I stepped aside to let her in, surprised by her directness. "You don't need to apologize for her choices, Emma. I've got everything packed and ready to go." She glanced around the cabin, taking in the rustic but well-maintained interior, the wildlife photography on the walls, the bookshelf filled with field guides and conservation texts. "I've always wondered what this place looked like inside." Sophia posted photos, but they never showed the real character of it. "She usually only photographed the photogenic corners," I said, carrying a box toward her car. "The parts that looked good with the right filter and lighting." Emma helped me load the boxes, and I found myself genuinely curious about her perspective on the whole situation. Unlike Sophia, who treated conversations like opportunities to talk about herself, Emma asked thoughtful questions about my work, the land around the cabin, and the wildlife rehabilitation efforts I supported in the area. "You know," she said as we loaded the last box, "I've always admired what you do. Conservation education, teaching people to respect nature instead of just consuming it, that's real work that matters." I looked at her more carefully, noticing the way she handled Sophia's expensive belongings with a kind of bemused detachment, like she was moving props from a play she'd never wanted to see. "Sophia never mentioned you were interested in conservation work." "Sophia doesn't pay attention to things that don't directly benefit her social media presence," Emma said with a dry laugh that held years of sisterly frustration. "I'm a veterinary surgeon specializing in wildlife rehabilitation. I spend my days helping injured animals that most people never even notice, while she spends hers photographing overpriced smoothies and calling it lifestyle content." We stood there for a moment, both of us processing the irony that I'd spent 3 years with someone who posted about mountain living, while her sister actually understood and lived the values I cared about. Emma glanced back toward the cabin, then at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Can I ask you something personal? Were you actually happy with her, or were you just used to it?" The question caught me off guard because it forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding. I thought I was happy, but looking back, I think I was mostly just comfortable with trying to make her happy. "There's a difference." "There really is," she said quietly. "I've been engaged for 2 years to someone who checks all the right boxes on paper: successful investment banker, financially stable, socially impressive, but I realized recently that I feel more like his accessory than his partner." We talked for another hour, sitting on my cabin's front porch while the afternoon light filtered through the pine trees. Emma told me about her work with injured wildlife, her frustrations with a fiancé who saw her career as a phase she'd outgrow, and her growing realization that she'd been settling for someone who looked good on paper instead of someone who actually understood her values. I found myself sharing things I'd never talked about with Sophia: my long-term plans for expanding my education programs, my research into sustainable tourism practices, my genuine passion for conservation work that went far beyond just playing in the dirt. "This is going to sound crazy," Emma said as the sun started setting behind the mountains, "but I feel like I've learned more about what I actually want from life in the last 2 hours than I have in the last 2 years." "It doesn't sound crazy at all," I replied, realizing that I felt the same way. Sometimes it takes meeting the right person to realize how wrong the previous situation was. She smiled, the first genuinely happy expression I'd seen from anyone in Sophia's family. Would it be completely inappropriate if I asked whether you'd like to have dinner sometime? Somewhere without any social media documentation required. I looked at this woman who appreciated my work, understood the value of authentic connection over surface appearances, and had the courage to question her own choices instead of just blaming everyone else for her problems. I think that would be the best idea anyone's had in a very long time. Within days of our first dinner, Sophia launched what I can only describe as a social media warfare campaign designed to rewrite the entire narrative of our relationship. Her Instagram stories became a carefully curated exhibition of victimhood, featuring old photos of us with captions like, "Sometimes you don't realize you were settling until you find your worth," and "Red flags aren't always obvious when you're blinded by loyalty." She posted a particularly manipulative carousel of images showing her journey of self-discovery, which apparently included recognizing my emotional unavailability and financial limitations as relationship deal breakers she'd been too kind to address directly. The irony wasn't lost on me that someone who'd publicly humiliated me at an expensive restaurant was now claiming I was emotionally unavailable. What Sophia hadn't counted on was that several people at Meridian had filmed her outburst, and they started posting their own videos showing exactly what had happened. Madison, ironically, posted a video that captured Sophia's entire cruel speech about me being good enough for friends with benefits, while she looked for someone more financially ambitious. The contrast between her victim narrative and the actual footage of her behavior was devastating to her carefully maintained online persona. "Girl, this is not the flex you think it is," read one comment with 3,000 likes. "Imagine publicly humiliating someone for having a job they're passionate about," read another. Meanwhile, Emma and I were taking things slowly but steadily, spending our evenings on long mountain walks where she'd identify wildlife tracks while I pointed out edible plants and natural shelter materials. She had this incredible way of seeing the forest as a complex ecosystem instead of just a pretty backdrop for photos, and I found myself falling for someone who actually understood the work I did instead of just tolerating it. Our second date was at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where she worked, and watching her carefully examine an injured hawk while explaining the treatment process made me realize I'd never been with someone whose intelligence and competence genuinely impressed me. This is what passion looks like, I thought, watching her gently immobilize the bird's wing while discussing the rehabilitation timeline. Not whatever Sophia was performing for her followers. Emma was dealing with her own relationship reckoning. Her fiancé, Marcus, had apparently not taken her growing distance well and was pressuring her to set a wedding date while simultaneously dismissing her concerns about their fundamental incompatibility. "He keeps saying I'm overthinking things," she told me during a particularly honest conversation while we prepared dinner at my cabin. "Like wanting to feel understood and valued by your partner is some kind of unrealistic expectation." "That's not overthinking," I said, watching her efficiently chop vegetables with the same careful precision she used for everything. "That's having standards." The contrast between Emma's thoughtful approach to life and Sophia's performative existence became more apparent every day. Where Sophia had demanded constant validation and expensive gestures, Emma insisted on splitting dinner checks and genuinely listened when I talked about expanding my wilderness education programs into environmental conservation initiatives. She even offered her veterinary expertise for the wildlife component, suggesting partnerships that could benefit both our professional goals. 3 weeks into whatever we were building together, Sophia's social media strategy backfired spectacularly when Jessica, one of her influencer friends, posted her own video from that night at Meridian. "Y'all need to see what actually happened," Jessica wrote, "because this victim narrative isn't matching the receipts." Her video showed Sophia not only humiliating me but also being dismissive and rude to the restaurant staff, demanding they retake photos of her meal multiple times and complaining loudly about the lighting ruining her content. The comments section became a brutal dissection of Sophia's character, with former followers sharing their own stories of her entitled behavior at events and brand partnerships. "She made my photographer friend reshoot her pictures for 2 hours because the sunset wasn't golden hour enough," one person wrote. then refused to pay the agreed rate because she wasn't happy with how her outfit looked. Emma showed me some of the fallout during one of our dinners, not out of malice but because she thought I should know how dramatically public opinion had shifted. I almost feel bad for her, Emma said, scrolling through comments that were genuinely harsh. Almost. But then I remember how she treated you, and how she's always treated service workers and anyone she considers beneath her social status. She made her choices, I replied, realizing I genuinely felt more relief than vindication. I'm just grateful I'm not dealing with the aftermath of being associated with that behavior anymore. What I hadn't expected was how Sophia's public downfall would actually benefit my own professional reputation. The videos of me remaining calm and respectful while being publicly berated started getting shared in different contexts, with people praising my composure under pressure. I received several inquiries about corporate team-building programs, with companies specifically mentioning they wanted someone who could handle difficult situations with professionalism. Wilderness survival skills apparently include surviving social media drama. Emma joked when I told her about a particularly lucrative contract offer from a tech company that wanted leadership training in outdoor settings. Maybe Sophia accidentally did you a favor by showing everyone how you handle adversity. Our relationship was developing into something I'd never experienced before. Partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine compatibility instead of just physical attraction and social convenience. Emma's intelligence challenged me to think more deeply about conservation issues, while my knowledge of sustainable outdoor practices complemented her wildlife rehabilitation work in ways that benefited both our careers. I broke up with Marcus yesterday. She told me 6 weeks after we'd started seeing each other, her voice steady but relieved. He said I was making a mistake, that I'd never find someone who could provide the lifestyle he offered. How do you feel about that? I asked, though her relaxed posture already gave me the answer. Like I finally stopped trying to fit into someone else's idea of what my life should look like, she said, reaching across the table to take my hand. Turns out I'd rather build something authentic with someone who actually sees me than maintain something impressive with someone who sees me as an accessory. The social media fallout continued to snowball in ways that completely dismantled Sophia's carefully constructed influencer persona. Her former friends began posting their own stories about her behavior, creating a domino effect that revealed years of entitled treatment toward anyone she considered beneath her status. Madison shared screenshots of group chats where Sophia had mocked restaurant servers, complained about having to tip, and demanded free products from small businesses in exchange for exposure that never materialized into actual sales. Jessica posted a video compilation of Sophia's demands during their various collaborations, including footage of her screaming at a photographer for not making her look aspirational enough and refusing to pay agreed rates because the final images didn't meet her impossible standards. The most damaging revelation came when several brand representatives started sharing their own experiences with Sophia's unprofessional behavior, including missed deadlines, last-minute cancellations, and attempts to renegotiate contracts after work was already completed. Her engagement rates plummeted as followers realized they'd been supporting someone whose online persona was completely fabricated, built on the exploitation of service workers and manipulation of business relationships. Meanwhile, Emma and I were discovering just how compatible our professional goals actually were. During one of our evening walks through the mountain trails near my cabin, she mentioned her frustration with the limited funding for wildlife rehabilitation programs, while I'd been struggling with the seasonal nature of my wilderness education contracts. What if we combined our expertise? She suggested, stopping to examine tracks from what looked like an injured deer. Environmental education programs that include wildlife rehabilitation components, teaching people about conservation through hands-on experience with actual animals. The idea was brilliant, addressing both our professional challenges while creating something neither of us could accomplish alone. We spent hours developing proposals for integrated programs that would teach sustainable outdoor practices alongside wildlife care, appealing to both environmental education markets and veterinary training programs. Our first joint presentation to a potential corporate client went better than either of us had dared hope, resulting in a contract worth more than I'd made in the previous 6 months. Emma's scientific approach to animal behavior complemented my practical knowledge of outdoor survival in ways that impressed clients looking for comprehensive team-building experiences. "You too have something special here," the corporate training director told us after watching Emma rehabilitate an injured owl while I demonstrated sustainable camping techniques. "This isn't just education, it's transformation." What we hadn't expected was Sophia's reaction when she discovered Emma and I were not only dating but also working together professionally. The news reached her through mutual friends who were impressed by our joint conservation programs, and her response was swift and predictably manipulative. She called Emma directly, bypassing my blocked number, demanding to know how long we'd been sneaking around behind her back, and threatening to expose private details about my past unless Emma ended the relationship immediately. "She's completely lost it," Emma told me after hanging up on what had apparently been a 30-minute tirade filled with accusations, threats, and increasingly desperate manipulation tactics. "She's claiming you manipulated me as revenge against her, that I'm just a rebound she's protecting me from, and that our family doesn't understand what kind of person you really are." The threats escalated when Sophia showed up unannounced at Emma's parents' house, demanding a family meeting to expose the truth about my character and our relationship. What she hadn't counted on was that Emma had already told her parents everything about both my relationship with Sophia and our developing partnership, including playing them the restaurant videos that showed exactly how Sophia had treated me. She stood in our living room for 20 minutes screaming about how I'd stolen her boyfriend and destroyed her life, Emma's mother told me later with barely concealed disgust. Then demanded that we choose sides and cut Emma off unless she stopped seeing you. "What did you tell her?" I asked, genuinely curious how parents would handle such an impossible situation. "We told her that after seeing how she treated you at that restaurant, we were grateful Emma had found someone with integrity," her father said firmly. "And that if anyone needed to be cut off from this family, it wasn't Emma." The family meeting Sophia had demanded turned into an intervention about her own behavior, with her parents and extended family confronting her about years of entitled treatment, manipulation tactics, and the embarrassment her public meltdown had brought to their family name. Several relatives mentioned they'd been following the social media drama and were appalled by both her original behavior and her continued victim narrative. "We raised you better than this," her mother said during what Emma described as the most uncomfortable family gathering in their history. "Blake was nothing but respectful to our family for 3 years, and your response to his kindness was to humiliate him publicly and then blame everyone else for the consequences." Sophia's final desperate move was threatening legal action, claiming Emma had interfered with her relationship and that I was guilty of emotional manipulation for dating her sister. The threats were empty and everyone knew it, but they revealed just how completely she'd lost touch with reality and personal responsibility. "She's making herself look worse with every move," Emma observed after we received a cease and desist letter from some bargain bin lawyer who'd clearly taken the case without understanding the actual facts. "At this point, she's just documenting her own instability." The most satisfying moment came when Emma's extended family, who'd been watching the entire drama unfold, started openly supporting our relationship and professional partnership. Her grandmother, a formidable woman who'd built her own veterinary practice in the 1960s, pulled me aside at a family barbecue to tell me she'd never seen Emma so happy or professionally fulfilled. "Sophia was always concerned with what things looked like," she said with the blunt honesty of someone who'd lived long enough to spot nonsense immediately. "Emma cares about what things actually are, and so do you, which is why this works." Sophia's legal threats quickly escalated into an embarrassing spectacle that revealed just how disconnected from reality she'd become. Her lawyer, clearly working with incomplete information, sent a demand letter claiming I owed her compensation for emotional damages, and that my cabin represented a shared residence, where she had property rights despite never contributing a single payment toward the mortgage, utilities, or maintenance. The letter also alleged that Emma had tortiously interfered with our relationship, apparently unaware that Sophia had publicly ended things herself at an expensive restaurant while suggesting we become friends with benefits. My response was swift and comprehensive, thanks to my naturally organized record-keeping habits that Sophia had always mocked as obsessive. I provided bank statements showing every mortgage payment, utility bill, and maintenance expense I'd covered alone, along with documentation proving Sophia had never been on any lease, deed, or legal document related to the property. Her own social media posts became evidence against her claims, particularly the restaurant videos and her subsequent posts about recognizing red flags and finding someone more financially ambitious. The lawyer dropped her case within 2 weeks, probably after realizing his client had no legal standing and had essentially documented her own misconduct through social media. I've never seen someone torpedo their own legal case so thoroughly, Emma laughed when we received the withdrawal notice. She literally created a public record of ending the relationship herself and then tried to claim you damaged her emotionally by respecting her decision. What I hadn't anticipated was how the public documentation of my professionalism under pressure would actually benefit my business in unexpected ways. The restaurant videos had gone viral in professional development circles, with management consultants using them as examples of grace under pressure and conflict resolution. Several major corporations reached out specifically because they'd seen how I handled being publicly berated while maintaining complete composure and respect. We need someone who can teach our executives that level of emotional regulation, the head of human resources at a Fortune 500 company told me during a consultation call. Your response to that situation showed exactly the kind of leadership skills we want our people to develop. The contracts started rolling in faster than I could handle alone, leading to the expansion I'd been dreaming about for years. Emma's veterinary expertise became integral to the programs, as companies wanted comprehensive team-building experiences that included both survival skills and wildlife education components. Our joint presentations impressed clients looking for innovative approaches to leadership training, environmental responsibility, and stress management. You too have created something completely unique, a corporate training director told us after a particularly successful 3-day program. The combination of practical survival skills and animal behavior psychology creates breakthrough moments we've never seen in traditional team-building exercises. Meanwhile, Sophia's influencer career continued its spectacular collapse as brands distanced themselves from the negative publicity. Her follower count dropped by 60% as people realized they'd been supporting someone whose entire persona was built on manipulation and entitlement. The final blow came when several major brands publicly announced they were ending partnerships due to misalignment with company values, corporate speak for not wanting to be associated with someone who treated service workers like garbage. Her desperate attempts to rebrand herself as a vulnerability and growth influencer fell flat when her audience remembered exactly how she'd treated people during her rise to minor internet fame. The comment sections of her posts became brutal reminders of her behavior, with former followers sharing their own experiences of her entitled treatment during brand events and collaborations. Remember when you made that photographer reshoot your content for 3 hours because the lighting wasn't golden hour enough and then refused to pay? One comment read with hundreds of likes. This whole growth journey thing is just another performance. Emma and I were building something real while Sophia was desperately trying to rebuild something that had always been artificial. Our conservation programs were getting recognition from environmental organizations, leading to partnerships with national parks and wildlife refuges that expanded our reach beyond corporate training into genuine conservation education. What you two are doing is exactly what environmental education needs, the director of a major wildlife sanctuary told us during a site visit. Combining practical skills with scientific knowledge creates lasting behavioral change that traditional awareness campaigns can't achieve. The most satisfying professional moment came when we were invited to present our integrated programs at a national conservation conference, speaking to an audience of scientists, educators, and policymakers who genuinely understood the value of what we were building. Emma's presentation on wildlife rehabilitation techniques combined with my demonstration of sustainable survival practices received a standing ovation and led to consulting opportunities with federal environmental agencies. This is what success actually looks like, Emma said as we drove home from the conference, our calendar full of meaningful projects that would benefit both wildlife conservation and environmental education. Not follower counts or brand partnerships, but work that actually matters and creates positive change. Sophia made one final desperate attempt to insert herself into our success, showing up unannounced at one of our corporate training sessions with some story about being a wildlife photography influencer who wanted to collaborate on content. The irony of someone who'd mocked my outdoor career trying to leverage our success for her own rehabilitation wasn't lost on anyone present, especially since she was clearly terrified of the injured hawk Emma was demonstrating rehabilitation techniques with. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I told her calmly while the corporate clients watched this bizarre interruption unfold. "This is a closed professional training session, and we don't have any partnerships available with content creators." Her face went through several expressions before settling on humiliated rage, but she left without causing a scene, probably realizing that any dramatic behavior would only further damage her already destroyed reputation. "Was that really your ex-girlfriend?" one of the executives asked after she left. "Because that was wildly inappropriate professional behavior. That was someone who never understood the difference between real work and performance," I replied, watching Emma expertly handle the hawk while explaining wildlife rehabilitation protocols to genuinely interested professionals. "We focus on substance here, not spectacle." 6 months after that disastrous anniversary dinner at Meridian, Emma and I had built something I'd never imagined possible: a thriving conservation business, a relationship based on genuine partnership, and the kind of personal happiness that comes from being with someone who actually values what you bring to the world. Our professional success had exceeded every projection, with corporate contracts booked solid through the following year and expansion opportunities that would establish us as leaders in environmental education. More importantly, Emma had become my best friend, creative partner, and the person I looked forward to building a future with every single day. When I proposed during a sunrise moment at the Wildlife Rehabilitation Center where we'd had our second date, surrounded by the animals she'd helped heal and the conservation work we'd built together, her yes felt like the most natural thing in the world. We decided to announce our engagement at Emma's annual family reunion, partly because it felt right to share our happiness with people who'd supported us from the beginning, and partly because we knew it would force a final confrontation with the Sophia situation that we could handle on our own terms. The reunion was held at Emma's grandparents' mountain property, a beautiful setting that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with Colorado's wilderness in the first place. Emma's extended family had been following our professional success and personal journey, and they genuinely seemed thrilled about our engagement and the life we were building together. "You two are proof that good things happen to good people," her uncle told me while we prepared the barbecue setup. "After watching what Sophia put you through, seeing Emma this happy feels like justice." The announcement itself was perfect, Emma's grandmother asking everyone to gather around for some wonderful news, followed by Emma and me sharing our engagement and our excitement about continuing to build our conservation work together. The family's response was overwhelmingly positive, with genuine congratulations, questions about wedding plans, and enthusiasm about our professional partnerships that had been featured in several environmental publications. Then Sophia arrived. She'd apparently been staying with a distant cousin, timing her visit to coincide with the reunion in what was clearly a calculated attempt to insert herself into our celebration. She walked into the gathering wearing an outfit that screamed desperate attention-seeking, overly formal designer dress completely inappropriate for a casual family barbecue, makeup that looked like she was attending a red carpet event, and an attitude that suggested she expected to be the center of attention. "Well, isn't this a surprise?" she announced loudly, interrupting conversations throughout the gathering. "My sister's engagement party, and nobody thought to mention it to me directly." The silence that followed was profoundly uncomfortable, but not in the way she'd probably hoped. Instead of creating drama that would focus attention on her grievances, she just reminded everyone present exactly why she'd been excluded from the announcement in the first place. Emma's response was perfect, calm, direct, and completely unbothered by the attempted manipulation. "Sophia, we're celebrating our engagement with family who've supported our relationship. You're welcome to congratulate us or leave, but you're not welcome to create drama at our celebration." "Our relationship?" Sophia's voice cracked with a mixture of disbelief and desperate anger. "He was my boyfriend for 3 years before you decided to steal him as revenge for whatever imaginary slight you think I committed against you." The accusation was so absurd that several family members actually laughed, not cruelly but with the kind of disbelief that comes from witnessing someone completely rewrite obvious history. Emma's father, a man who'd been quietly observing the situation, stepped forward with the kind of authority that comes from years of dealing with difficult situations in his law practice. "Sophia, we all saw the videos of how you treated Blake at that restaurant," he said firmly. "You ended your relationship publicly and cruelly, suggesting he become your friend with benefits while you looked for someone more financially impressive. Emma and Blake built their relationship after you'd already thrown yours away." "That's not what happened," Sophia protested, but her voice lacked conviction because everyone present knew exactly what had happened. "Blake manipulated Emma as revenge against me because he couldn't handle being rejected by someone out of his league." The desperation in her voice was obvious to everyone, but what happened next was even more telling. Instead of the family drama she'd clearly hoped to create, she faced a wall of unified disapproval from relatives who'd watched her behavior escalate over the previous months. Emma's mother, typically diplomatic in family situations, addressed Sophia with barely concealed disgust. "We're ashamed of how you've behaved throughout this entire situation," she said quietly. "Blake showed our family nothing but respect for 3 years, and your response was to humiliate him publicly and then blame everyone else for the consequences. Emma found someone who treats her with the kindness and respect she deserves, and we're grateful for that." The intervention wasn't planned, but it was thorough. Relative after relative shared their observations about the contrast between Blake's respectful behavior and Sophia's entitled demands, her treatment of family events as photo opportunities rather than genuine celebrations, and her pattern of manipulation whenever things didn't go exactly her way. The most devastating comment came from Emma's teenage cousin, who'd apparently been following the social media drama with the sharp-eyed judgment of someone too young to be polite about obvious nonsense. "You literally posted about finding someone more ambitious than Blake," she said with brutal teenage honesty. "Then got mad when he moved on with someone who actually appreciates him? That's not revenge, that's just consequences." Sophia's final desperate move was claiming that Blake and Emma's professional success was somehow stolen from opportunities that should have been hers, since she'd been posting about authentic mountain living long before they'd started their conservation programs. The claim was so ridiculous that it actually broke the tension, with several family members openly laughing at the idea that posting filtered photos of expensive smoothies constituted expertise in environmental education or wildlife rehabilitation. "Blake has an actual degree in environmental science and years of professional experience," Emma said with scientific precision. "I'm a veterinary surgeon with specialized training in wildlife rehabilitation. Our qualifications aren't stolen from your Instagram content." The celebration resumed after Sophia left, but the real vindication came in the conversations that followed. Family members who'd been polite but distant during my relationship with Sophia were genuinely enthusiastic about our engagement, sharing their relief that Emma had found someone who valued her intelligence and expertise rather than treating her as an accessory to their social media presence. "We always wondered what you saw in Sophia," Emma's grandfather told me during a quiet moment. "She never seemed interested in anything that didn't benefit her image. Emma lights up when she talks about your conservation work together, and you light up when you talk about her veterinary expertise. That's what partnership actually looks like." 2 years later, Emma and I had transformed our mountain conservation programs into something that exceeded our wildest professional dreams. Our environmental education center occupied 40 acres of pristine Colorado wilderness, featuring state-of-the-art wildlife rehabilitation facilities alongside sustainable demonstration sites for wilderness survival and conservation techniques. Emma's veterinary expertise had attracted partnerships with major wildlife organizations, while my wilderness education background had evolved into consulting work for national parks and environmental agencies. We employed 12 full-time staff members and hosted programs that drew participants from across the country, creating the kind of meaningful impact we'd both dreamed of making in environmental conservation. Our wedding was planned for September at the education center itself, surrounded by the work we'd built together and the landscape that had brought us both to our life's purpose. Emma had insisted on a ceremony that reflected our values: locally sourced catering, minimal waste decorations, and invitations requesting donations to wildlife rehabilitation rather than traditional gifts. Everything about the planning process had been a joy because we were genuinely excited about celebrating our partnership with people who understood and supported what we'd built together. 3 days before the wedding, while Emma was handling final details with the catering team and I was setting up the outdoor ceremony space, Sophia appeared at our education center entrance looking like someone who'd been living rough for months. Her designer clothes had been replaced by ill-fitting discount store outfits. Her previously perfect hair and makeup showed signs of serious financial constraints, and everything about her appearance suggested someone whose influencer lifestyle had completely collapsed. She approached me while I was arranging chairs, clearly having timed her arrival for when Emma was busy elsewhere. "Blake, I know this is awkward timing, but I have important information about your past that Emma deserves to know before she makes the biggest mistake of her life." The words were delivered with the dramatic flair of someone who'd rehearsed this moment, but her appearance and obvious desperation undermined whatever impact she'd hoped to create. "Sophia, you need to leave," I said calmly, continuing my setup work without giving her the emotional reaction she was clearly seeking. "This is a private venue and you're trespassing." "I'm trying to save your fiancé from a terrible mistake," she insisted, her voice rising with familiar manipulation tactics. "You manipulated her into this relationship as revenge against me, and she's too naive to see how you're using her veterinary expertise to build the career you could never create on your own." The accusations were so absurd and disconnected from reality that I almost laughed, but I could see she was building towards some kind of dramatic revelation that she believed would destroy our wedding. Behind her, I noticed Emma emerging from the catering tent with several family members who'd arrived early to help with preparations, all of whom could see and hear exactly what was happening. "Emma deserves to know that you're only marrying her because she has the professional credentials and family connections you needed to make your little wilderness fantasy successful," Sophia continued, apparently unaware that her intended victim was approaching. "I know about your financial problems before we broke up, your desperation to prove you weren't the failure I said you were." Emma reached our conversation area just as Sophia delivered what was clearly meant to be her devastating finale. "She needs to know that everything you've built together is just elaborate revenge against me for choosing someone more successful than you'll ever be." The silence that followed lasted long enough for everyone present to process the complete disconnect between Sophia's claims and the obvious reality of our successful business, strong relationship, and impending celebration. Emma's response was perfect, calm, intelligent, and delivered with the kind of scientific precision she brought to her veterinary work. "Sophia, unlike you, I actually know Blake's real character, including whatever flaws or challenges he's faced," she said evenly. "That's what real partnerships are built on. Understanding and accepting each other completely, not maintaining some perfect image for public consumption." She stepped closer to me, not defensively but with the confidence of someone who was genuinely secure in their relationship and life choices. "I know about his financial situation when you two were together, his struggles to build his business while supporting your lifestyle, and his decision to prioritize authentic work over impressive income. Those aren't secrets or manipulation tactics, they're exactly why I respect him." The family members who'd gathered to witness this bizarre interruption began expressing their own opinions about Sophia's appearance and accusations. Emma's mother was particularly direct, having dealt with years of Sophia's dramatic manipulations. "You lost the right to have opinions about Emma's life choices when you publicly humiliated someone who'd shown your family nothing but respect," she said firmly. "Blake and Emma built something meaningful together, while you've apparently spent the last 2 years blaming everyone else for the consequences of your own behavior." What happened next revealed just how completely Sophia had lost touch with reality and social awareness. Instead of recognizing that her dramatic intervention had failed and leaving with whatever dignity remained, she doubled down with increasingly desperate accusations that made her look unstable rather than protective. "You're all being manipulated by someone who's using Emma's success to build the life he could never create on his own," she insisted, her voice becoming shrill with desperation. "Can't you see that he's everything I said he was? Unambitious, financially limited, emotionally unavailable?" Emma's teenage cousin, now 2 years older and even less tolerant of obvious nonsense, provided the final response that ended Sophia's dramatic performance. "So you're saying Blake is terrible, but you're here trying to break up his wedding because you want him back?" she asked with brutal logic. "That makes you look desperate, not protective." The comment crystallized exactly how pathetic Sophia's behavior appeared to everyone present. She'd spent 2 years claiming Blake was beneath her standards while simultaneously trying to destroy his happiness with someone else, revealing that her objections had nothing to do with protecting Emma and everything to do with her own inability to accept that he'd moved on successfully. Security arrived within minutes of Emma's call, professionally escorting Sophia from the property while she continued making increasingly unhinged accusations about manipulation and revenge. The entire incident lasted less than 20 minutes, but it provided the perfect closure to a chapter of our lives that had defined our early relationship. "Well, that was therapeutic," Emma said as we watched Sophia's car disappear down the mountain road. "Seeing her desperation compared to what we've actually built together makes me even more grateful for the choice we made to focus on substance over spectacle." Our wedding proceeded without any further drama, surrounded by people who genuinely understood and supported what we'd created together. The ceremony itself took place at sunset with Emma's rehabilitated hawks flying overhead, a perfect symbol of the conservation work that had brought us together and the life we were choosing to build as partners. During our vows, I looked at the woman who'd appreciated my environmental work from our first conversation, who'd contributed her expertise to make our shared dreams bigger than either of us could have achieved alone, and who'd chosen authenticity over social status at every decision point. "Thank you for seeing the value in building something real together," I said, meaning every word. Emma's response captured everything that made our partnership work. "Thank you for showing me what it looks like when someone loves your mind, your work, and your character instead of just your potential to enhance their image." As we celebrated with family and friends who'd supported our relationship from the beginning, I realized that Sophia's dramatic restaurant ultimatum 2 years earlier had been the best thing that ever happened to me. Her demand that I become her friend with benefits, while she looked for someone more impressive, had freed me to find someone who valued exactly what she'd rejected: my commitment to meaningful work, authentic relationships, and building something lasting rather than just photogenic.